Good afternoon and welcome into Sports Talk on a Budget. It is Saturday, August 10th, year of our Lord 2024. Doing a Saturday episode, couple weekend episodes here. Been busy during the week, but doing a Saturday episode today. This will be the final in my series of breaking down two divisions in the NFL and a conference in college football. Before I get into that, though, and what will end up being the topics for the show, just want to remind you, if you like the audio version here on YouTube, you can find it under Sports Talk on a Budget. Please like and subscribe right down here. Leave a comment if you'd like, but like and subscribe to the show. Really could use the help there as well. And then if you prefer the audio version, actually doing a lot better on the audio version, on podcast version, whether you like it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon Music, you can basically find it wherever you get your podcasts. Please like and subscribe to the show on there as well. Just wanted to do that disclosure there. But to look at the show, kind of already mentioned the topics. But now we're getting to the end of my series of breaking down two divisions in the NFL and a conference in college football. And that means we're all the way to the West Coast. And I am breaking down the AFC and NFC West divisions, going team by team, breaking down each team, answering some of the main questions that I have for each team going into the season. And then the last of now what is known as the Power Four, used to be the Power Five, but no more Pac-12. So the last of the Power Four conferences in college football, and that is the Big 12, maybe the deepest and most competitive conference in the Big Four. Going to break down that, some of the top contenders, new teams, and teams I like in that conference. And then what I've also been doing, started this series a couple weeks ago, is listing my top 5 players at each position of all time in Major League Baseball history. We did catchers, first baseman. Now we're on to second baseman. I will list my top 5 second basemen of all time. Definitely want to hear your comments on when it comes to that. And I would love to hear some of my listeners and followers out there, their top 5s as well. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into this show. And as I've mentioned already a couple of times, we're breaking down, this is the last of our series of breaking down two divisions in the NFL. And we are on the West Coast. It is the AFC and NFC West breakdown. We'll go ahead and start in the AFC. And when you're talking about the AFC West, you have to start with the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, the two-time defending Super Bowl champions, going for a three-peat, would be the first team in NFL history to three-peat. We've had some back-to-backs, whether that's the Patriots, the Cowboys in the 90s, the 49ers in the 80s, and the Steelers in the 70s. So we've had some back-to-back champions, but we've never had a three-peat. Teams came close. I believe when the Patriots were going for the three-peat back in 2006, they lost in the divisional round to the Denver Broncos. So they got to the playoffs, to the second round, but couldn't get any further than that. So we'll see what happens with the Chiefs here. Can they get that three-peat? That's one of the biggest questions, of course, for them going into the season. But one of my bigger questions, and one of the issues they had last year, was wide receiver position. Now, it wasn't obviously big enough to stop them from winning another Super Bowl, but it was one of the glaring issues they had throughout the regular season. And with Travis Kelce, he had a great postseason, probably his worst regular season as a pro, but had a great postseason last year. But how can we keep counting on him to be the Travis Kelce that we know he could be, to be that reliable for Patrick Mahomes? He's getting older. He's almost in his mid-30s now. Can we keep counting on him to be that guy, or is Father Time going to start creeping in? He's had a little bit of injury history, but not a lot, so that works in his favor as well. Still will probably be the number one receiving option for Patrick Mahomes in this Chiefs offense, but the bigger question is, have they done enough to upgrade their receiver core? Don't know what the status will be of Rashee Rice. There hasn't been a suspension yet from some of his off-field issues that he's had this offseason. I don't know if there's going to be a suspension by week 1, so they may have him this season, maybe a suspension next season, because I really doubt that they would suspend him midway through the season. But then you bring in Hollywood Brown and you draft Xavier Worthy. And is that going to be enough? Xavier Worthy was a good player at Texas. He's kind of a smaller guy, about 160 pounds. Obviously a speed guy, setting the record for the fastest 40 time at the Combine. A little bit of like a Deshaun Jackson, and we saw what Deshaun Jackson did in an Andy Reid offense back when he was with the Eagles in the beginning of his career. And then Hollywood Brown is kind of that speed guy as well. So do they have enough kind of possession receivers? Is that what Rashee Rice is going to become for the Kansas City Chiefs this year, is more of a possession receiver? So that's my biggest question mark for the Chiefs offense heading into the season. is did they upgrade that wide receiver position enough? I think they're definitely better at the wide receiver position than they were last year, but is it going to be good enough? I think it will be because you have Patrick Mahomes pulling the strings there, so they don't have to be great. They just got to be good enough, and I think they will be good enough. The next question for this Chiefs team that I have is there any complacency? A lot of players on this team have won at least 2, if not 3 Super Bowls at this point. The main guys on the team, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Chris Jones, they have 3 Super Bowls. I know you're going for history and winning and getting a three-peat that no one's ever done, but will there be any complacency that sets in? Do you get kind of to the dog days of October and early November where you've already kind of cruised, you're leading the division, maybe you lose a couple of games back to back and you lose your focus a little bit? That sort of happened last year in December for them, and then they regained their focus after that Christmas Day kind of debacle against the Raiders. So is there any complacency there? I don't think so, because I feel like going for a three-peat is enough of motivation if you are the Kansas City Chiefs. And with leaders like Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, I don't really see complacency setting in either. And then we'll move to the next team that we're going to talk about here in the AFC West, and that is the LA Chargers. And of course, the big news for the LA Chargers this offseason was hiring Michigan head coach and national champion now, Jim Harbaugh. And the biggest question is, and a lot of people are already kind of predicting and thinking that he's going to turn this team around right away. Can Harbaugh lead just a quick resurgence for this LA Chargers team? You lose Keenan Allen, you lose Mike Williams, you lose Austin Eckler. So what is the offense going to look like? And then a couple of weeks ago, you have Justin Herbert, your franchise quarterback, suffer a plantar fasciitis injury, which is more of a foot injury. He's going to be out for all of training camp and preseason. He is expected to start week 1, but with those foot injuries, especially a plantar fasciitis injury, I've never had one myself, but I've known people who've had one, and obviously people have had it in the league plenty of times as well. They're a little unpredictable, so he could be ready to go and re-injure it or not be 100% and kind of hinder his mobility and his movement as well. So that's a huge question mark. And just looking at this Chargers offense, you bring in J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. You basically get the Baltimore Ravens running back cast-offs as they signed Derrick Henry. Those guys are good when they're healthy. The problem is they're rarely healthy. And we know that Jim Harbaugh likes to run the ball. He likes to kind of set up the pass by running the ball, where that's kind of the opposite of what a lot of teams do now in this day and age in the NFL. But do you have enough at the running back position? First round pick Joe Alt, so now you have a right tackle Joe Alt and a left tackle Rashawn Slater. So you know your offensive line is really good with those 2 bookend tackles there. So you should be able to run the ball as long as those guys stay healthy. What do you have on the outside at wide receiver? Second-year wide receiver Quentin Johnson, who was your first pick last year out of TCU, not had a rough rookie year. We'll go ahead and put it like that. So can he bounce back and be who they thought he could be? You draft Ladd McConkey out of Georgia in the second round. He's more of like a slot possession receiver, but does have some good speed to beat you down the field as well. Can he kind of step into that wide receiver 2 role? A lot of question marks on the offensive side for this Chargers team. Still question marks on the defensive side with the injuries they've had there. Can it just be a seamless turnaround for Jim Harbaugh that happened at the 49ers, but that was over a decade ago? He hasn't been in the NFL for over a decade. The league has for sure changed in the time that he's been at Michigan in college football. So I don't know if we should expect a quick turnaround in year 1. I would probably look more to 2025 in year 2 for this team to turn around, especially with the injury questions already with Justin Herbert and at the running back position with just guys with injury history. So kind of tempered expectations for the Chargers going into the season, but we'll see. Jim Harbaugh seems to be a guy to go in and turn around things pretty quickly, but it doesn't always happen in year 1. Did not exactly happen in year 1 for Stanford, sort of happened in year 1 for Michigan, but did happen in year 1 for the Niners. But like I said, that was over a decade ago. So we'll see. Like I said, tempered expectations for the Chargers. And then we'll move to the Las Vegas Raiders. And the biggest question for the Raiders team and for their fans is who's going to be the week 1 starter at quarterback. Is it Aiden O'Connell, the second-year quarterback out of Purdue? Is it Gardner Minshew, one of their better free agent signings of the offseason, who came over from the Indianapolis Colts? No real indication yet. They play their preseason game this weekend, so we'll see who maybe gets more snaps and maybe someone can separate in a preseason game. Training camp, it looks like on the depth chart, it's Aiden O'Connell at number 1, but that could be this week. If Gardner Minshew goes in and has a better preseason game, maybe that changes. They have the weapons on the offensive side, whether it's Devontae Adams, you have Jacoby Myers, you just drafted Brock Bowers, you drafted Michael Mayer last year, the tight end out of Notre Dame in the 2023 draft. So you have the weapons for the quarterback, whoever steps in. Just the question is who is going to be that quarterback. And then the next question for me is the defensive side. You bring in Christian Wilkins. Now you have a defensive line of Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby. How much havoc can that wreak on opposing quarterbacks, especially when you play in a division with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert? So question marks there for the Raiders. Don't know what to really expect from the Raiders, kind of tempered expectations for them as well. But if they can get solid quarterback play from either O'Connell or Minshew, like I mentioned before, they have the weapons to make some noise on the offensive end. And then we'll go ahead and finish out the AFC West with the Denver Broncos. And the biggest question for the Denver Broncos is also who's going to be your week 1 starter. If I had to guess right now, it would probably be Bo Nix. It seems like Sean Payton likes Bo Nix a lot. Bo Nix is a kind of a very seamless fit for Sean Payton offense. I'm not going to go out and say he's Drew Brees, but he's a Drew Brees type. Not the biggest guy, not the biggest arm, but quick decision maker, quick release, and a guy who goes through his progressions very quick as well, which is perfect for Sean Payton offense, which is really what he had issues with last year with Russell Wilson, who is not a quick decision maker and not good at going through his progression. So I kind of expect it to be Bo Nix. You pick him over 12th overall in the first round. You probably want him to be your starting quarterback. No offense to Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson, but they're both on their second and third team respectively. So they're journeyman backups at this point. They're going to be career backups at this point. They shouldn't be your week 1 starter if you feel like Bo Nix is the guy. And we'll see how he does in the preseason game. And he's done well in training camp, and a lot of reports coming back from Denver is he looked the part, and you can hear Sean Payton kind of just raving about him during the week. So I really do believe it will be Bo Nix. But the bigger question and the more of the pressure is not going to be on Bo Nix. It's squarely on Sean Payton. You're in your second year as the Denver Broncos coach. You basically gave away Russell Wilson and $80 million, 80 plus, or about $78 million over the next 2 years, somewhere in that range. So you're paying Russell Wilson basically $38 million this year to go play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was mainly his decision, I believe. Now, I don't have any sources that know that, but I feel like what we've seen and what we heard from Sean Payton and just kind of the body language they had against each other last season, I believe it was Sean Payton's decision to move on from Russell Wilson and also his decision to go with Bo Nix as their first-round quarterback. But either way, pressure's on Sean Payton. He's a Super Bowl winning coach. He's supposed to be one of the best offensive minds in the league. Can he get this Denver Broncos team playing better? You lose Jerry Jeudy. Don't know how much of a loss that is. He never really lived up to the hype. You still have guys like Cortland Sutton, Javonte Williams at running back. So you still have some decent weapons for Bo Nix. You draft Troy Franklin, his number 1 wide receiver at Oregon. So that was a nice move for you as well. So tempered expectations again for the third team in the AFC West with the Denver Broncos. All these teams in the AFC West are obviously chasing the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know if any of them will catch them this year. Get to that prediction a little bit later in the month and maybe early September with my overall predictions for the NFL season. But it's hard to pick against the Chiefs, especially as just the division title. And so that was my AFC West breakdown. We'll go ahead and move to the NFC West. And just like in the AFC West, the NFC West, you have to start with the San Francisco 49ers. And that's where we're starting with the San Francisco 49ers. First question is, of course, the question that has been hovering over this franchise basically all offseason, especially these last couple of weeks in training camp, is Brandon Ayuk. Is he going to be there? Are they going to trade him? Is he going to hold out? Is he going to hold out and not play week 1? I would really be surprised if that happened. But what happens in that situation? Do they end up trading him to Cleveland or Pittsburgh? Looks like my Patriots are out. He doesn't want to play there or whatever. I don't blame him, but also just like, okay, you got to decide whether you want to play this season at some point. But what happens in this kind of saga with Brandon Ayuk in this situation, and what happens week 1? That's a huge question mark. Do they end up paying Trent Williams, which I think they already should have done? He's one of the best players on your team and probably still the best left tackle in the league. So they need to pay him. Brock Purdy took a giant step last year after his rookie season, had a very good year last year, finished in the top 5 in MVP voting. Can he continue on that trajectory? Can he continue to improve? Can he get better and better? Because if Brock Purdy has another year like last year, he's going to be a very, very rich man next offseason. He'll be making probably $60+ million per year if he has another good season. Of course, you have Christian McCaffrey. We've talked about this ad nauseum throughout the seasons with the San Francisco 49ers. We know that their roster stack. We know that they're a team that's going to contend for a Super Bowl, contend for an NFC championship. We know all that with the San Francisco 49ers. That conversation doesn't need to be had anymore. The only conversation left for this San Francisco 49ers team is, can they win a Super Bowl? Last year, you had the lead for most of the game in regulation last year in the Super Bowl. You had the lead in overtime. You couldn't finish the deal in overtime against the Chiefs. You came up short again. It's got to happen soon for the Niners because the bill is coming due for the Niners. Like I said, with Brock Purdy, if he has another good year like he did last year, he's going to be a very rich man, and that is going to probably mean bye-bye Brandon Ayuk and maybe bye-bye some of the other players as well. And now your roster is not going to be as deep. And so the window and the bill is coming due for this team. They got to get a Super Bowl championship at least this year or next year. The pressure is on the San Francisco 49ers. I know that they feel it there. I know that Kyle Shanahan feels it there. I think they'll be a good team this year. They're definitely a top 8 NFC West going into the season, but still pressure is on to get that Super Bowl for the San Francisco 49ers. And then we'll move down south to the LA Rams. And for me, the LA Rams, a couple of questions start right off the bat. Can Puka Nacua continue his stellar rookie season into his second season? Because he had one of the best rookie seasons for a wide receiver in NFL history. Didn't win a Rookie of the Year because of what C.J. Stroud did, and everything's kind of more of a quarterback award when it comes to the NFL now. Will Cooper Kupp bounce back? If Cooper Kupp can be just somewhere near the Cooper Kupp that we knew about 2-3 years ago, you put him with Puka Nacua, this could be a really, really dangerous offense. Of course, Matthew Stafford still has a lot left in the tank, in my opinion. When he's healthy, he's one of the best, probably 6 to 7 quarterbacks in the NFL. So really excited to see what this offense can be with Puka Nacua in his second year and with a healthy Cooper Kupp all the way through the offseason going into the season. And is this team kind of a fringe Super Bowl contender? I think they could be. Now, the defense is going to be a question mark. You have to replace one of the best defensive players of this last decade in a guy like Aaron Donald. We'll see what happens there. You have Kobe Turner, who was a very good player last year as a rookie. So he's going into his second year. Can he kind of step into that role a little bit? I believe that they drafted Jared Verse out of Florida State. That's a good player to put on the defensive line as well. He's more of an edge rusher, but still a good player to put on the defensive line. But is this team, like I said, kind of a fringe playoff contender kind of a fringe Super Bowl contender in this league? I think they could be. They need things to go their way, and they need health, obviously, which most teams do. But they could definitely be a fringe Super Bowl contender in the league this year. And then we'll move to Seattle Seahawks. And the question for me with these Seattle Seahawks is, what is the ceiling for this team? You look at their offense, 2 great running backs, in my opinion, in Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And young running backs, one's going into his third year, one's going into his second year. I love their receiving core. You have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, the ageless wonder there. And then going into his second year, you have Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State, who had a pretty good second half to his rookie season last year. Offensive line still a bit of a question mark, and Geno Smith is still the question mark. Is this going to be kind of Geno's last stand? You bring in Sam Howell from Washington to be his backup. Will that be some kind of a quarterback competition there? I don't love Sam Howell, but he's probably not much worse than Geno Smith. They have the weapons on offense, as I already mentioned. Geno Smith, if he's going to be your weak link in this on this team, then are they going to be in the quarterback market next year? What is the ceiling for this team? Are they a playoff team, and can they make some noise? Defense is still solid. You bring in Mike McDonald as the head coach, who was the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens last year. I thought that was a slam dunk hire. He's supposed to be kind of a boy genius at defensive coordinator or as a defensive mind, so that could really help their defense. They could be a sleeper team in the NFC, but kind of tempered expectations for them as well. And then we'll finish out the NFC West, and that is going to be with the Arizona Cardinals. And just some quick question marks for the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, does he bounce back this year? Missed the season early on last year due to injury. Can he bounce back? Does he finally have his number one wide receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously the wide receiver out of Ohio State, who I was super high on, one of the best wide receivers in college football in a long time to come into the NFL. So does he finally have his number one wide receiver? Is that the immediate number one option for the Arizona Cardinals? And is this team going to be more of kind of just a team that's plays spoiler and maybe gets a win against the Seahawks late in the season that keeps them out of the playoffs, or gets a win against the Rams late in the season that keeps them out of the division race with the 49ers? Don't know what to expect. I thought Jonathan Gannon did a solid job last year with this team. We had zero expectations going into the season for them, and they fought hard last year. They beat the Cowboys early on in the season. They had a lot of close games where they probably shouldn't have been close. They're a team that definitely plays hard and gets the most out of each and every player on that team. Can that be enough to maybe make them kind of a dark horse playoff contender, or is spoiler in the NFC West kind of the ceiling for them? Don't exactly know there. My expectations are not even tempered with the Arizona Cardinals. I don't really have any expectations. It's more of kind of a wait and see mode. But that was my breakdown of some of my biggest questions in both the AFC and NFC West. We'll move now from the NFL and move to college football. And my final breakdown of the Power Four conferences moves to the Big 12 conference. And the Big 12 historically, now you lose Texas and Oklahoma, of course, but even with Texas and Oklahoma, historically has been one of the most entertaining conferences. You get a lot of upsets. You have a very deep, maybe not a team that's on the top level in college football, but a deep, very competitive conference. The Big 12 has been, and I think will be going into this season. You bring in 4 new teams from the Pac-12 in Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State. Can any of those teams contend for a Big 12 title right off the bat? I do believe Utah can, and that's where we're going to start breaking down teams. Utah is the current favorite to win the Big 12. Not a big favorite. There's a lot of teams, kind of 4 to 5 teams at the top there that have really good odds to win the Big 12, but Utah is the current favorite. Cam Rising's back for his 15th year at Utah. I'm just kidding. I think it's like his 4th year at Utah, but either way, he's about 24, 25 years old right now. But he missed all of last year. He comes back this year. They also get Brent Keithy back at tight end, so that's going to be a combination to watch. When they were both healthy 2 years ago, they were very lethal on the offensive end. So I think that this Utah Utes team is going to have a good offense with Cam Rising at the helm. You know they're going to run the ball well because they always seem to run the ball well with Kyle Whittingham as the head coach there. You know they're going to play good defense because they always play good defense. It's death, taxes, and Utah playing physical defense. That's what they do, and that's what they've done forever under Kyle Whittingham. So I fully expect Utah to step into the Big 12 conference and immediately compete for a Big 12 title. Will not say who I think is going to win the Big 12 already, but I think they'll compete right away and will be a team at the very top of the Big 12. I'll get into my predictions there. Actually, this coming weekend, I'll get into that announcement a little bit later, but I'll get into my predictions here soon with my college football breakdown that is coming here soon as well. And then the next team I wanted to kind of look at was Kansas State. Finished the season off well last year, won their bowl game, the Pop-Tart Bowl. They were the inaugural Pop-Tart champions. They got to eat the live mascot. That was really cool to see. Now it's Avery Johnson's team. It was kind of Will Howard and Avery Johnson throughout the season last year. It is Avery Johnson's team now. He is a very dynamic player at quarterback. Question mark for me with Avery Johnson is, can he win from the pocket and throw the ball? That is not as big of a question mark in college football as is in the NFL, but you still need to be able to throw the ball and challenge defenses with your arm consistently to really win at a high level. And can Avery Johnson do that? And then should there be college football playoff expectations for this Kansas State team? I believe there should be, because you know the conference champion in the Big 12 gets an automatic bid into the college football playoff. And I think Kansas State is right up there as the number 2 contender in this conference behind Utah. And I really like what Chris Kleiman's done there with this Kansas State team. They've gotten better and better each year. And now without Oklahoma and Texas there, which kind of felt like their ceiling, they couldn't get past those 2 teams that would kind of upset Oklahoma. here and there, but weren't consistently good enough to beat those two teams on a consistent level. Now I think they can get to the head of the Big 12 table and really contend in that conference. And then we have one of the mainstays in the Big 12, and that is Oklahoma State, and that is under Mike Gundy. And all they do is win 8, 9, 10 games every single year under Mike Gundy. You bring back Ollie Gordon, who was the Doak Walker winner last year for the best running back in the country. And not only do you bring back Ollie Gordon, but you probably bring back the most experienced offensive line in the country at Oklahoma State. I don't have the numbers exactly, but there's well over 100 starts combined on the offensive line for Oklahoma State. Probably at least the top 2 or 3 at the very least experienced offensive lines in the country. When you pair that with a back like Ollie Gordon, you know they're going to run the ball really well. The quarterback position is a little bit of a question mark there. Blanking on the guy who's starting there, but he was kind of up and down last year. Let's see if they can bounce back, be a little bit more of a balanced offense and not just lean on Ollie Gordon. But if they need to, they will lean on Ollie Gordon and that offensive line, and I think that could be good enough for them to compete in the Big 12 and for a college football playoff spot. And then another team that's kind of been lurking and is ready to pounce on this conference, especially with Oklahoma and Texas going out the door, and that is Kansas. Kansas is another team. Biggest question mark for Kansas for the last, I think, 2 years at least, and going into this year as well, is Jalen Daniels at quarterback. When Jalen Daniels is healthy for Kansas at quarterback, they're a dangerous team. They're a very dangerous team. They run the ball well. Jalen Daniels is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks, not just in the Big 12 conference, but in all of college football. So can they continue this progression that they've had year after year after year? They've done really well under their current head coach. I'm blanking on his name. I know I should have had it in my notes, but they keep on getting better and better. Kansas is a team I think can also compete at the top of the Big 12 conference, especially if Jalen Daniels is there to be healthy. I really like this team going into the season. And then kind of my last major contender in the Big 12, at least for right now, is going to be the Arizona Wildcats. Now, you lose Jed Fish and a handful of transfers. They go up to Washington. They follow Jed Fish, who is now the head coach of the Washington Huskies. But you kept your 2 main players, and that is Noah Fafita at the quarterback position, and that is T-Mac Tetaroa McMillan, the wide receiver, one of the best wide receivers in the country. At the wide receiver position, you bring in Brent Brennan from San Jose State, kind of mixed bag of record for Brent Brennan at San Jose State, but it's not exactly easy to win at San Jose State, and they played a lot of tough out-of-conference games against Power 5 opponents, so can't really hold his record against him that much. But like I said, he was able to retain T-Mac and Fafita, which is huge, and that could arguably be the best wide receiver quarterback duo in the country going into the season. There's some other guys out there that you might be able to argue about, but these guys played high school together at Servite in Anaheim, California. So they know each other really well. They've been playing with each other for a long time. They looked awesome last year together. So I really like this Arizona team. Defense is still going to be a question mark. This is probably going to be a team that's going to have to outscore a lot of their opponents. But with those two leading your offense, you're going to be a really dynamic offense. And I think probably the most dynamic offense outside of maybe Kansas when Jalen Daniels is healthy in the entire conference. And then I just wanted to look at some of the dark horse contenders in this conference as well. We'll start with Iowa State. Iowa State, you have Rocco Becht returning as their starter. Started most of the games last year. Really kind of came on at the end of last year for Iowa State. Expect some decent expectations for him, and I think that they could contend for maybe a Big 12 title game appearance. I don't know if they could really contend for a Big 12 title game championship, but if you get in the game, especially in the Big 12, you probably can win. So either way, I do like Rocco Becht and the offense for Iowa State. You look at Texas Tech, they lose their quarterback who was Tyler Shuck last year. Second year under Joey McBride. Does this team get better and better? They were kind of up and down all last year. There were a lot of teams like dark horse contender for the Big 12 championship last year. Didn't really ever live up to that. Can they live up to that this year? Then you have UCF in their second year in this conference under Gus Malzahn. They bring in KJ Jefferson, the transfer quarterback who started 3 years at Arkansas. So there's some expectations there. I think they could be a dark horse contender, and maybe I should put them up. They would probably be my number 5 contender in this conference behind the first 4 teams that I mentioned. But this UCF team, I like the direction of them. I think KJ Jefferson gets away from the SEC, gets away from Arkansas, and I think he's comfortable in that offense with Gus Malzahn. And probably the best running quarterback that Gus Malzahn has had since he was the offensive coordinator for Auburn when Cam Newton was there. Not saying that KJ Jefferson is Cam Newton or anywhere close to that, but maybe they can have a similar, maybe like half of what his stats were this season. And then TCU, you were in the national title game 2 years ago. Terrible year last year. You end up 5-7 and missing a bowl game. Can they bounce back under Sonny Dykes in his 3rd season? Can they bounce back and contend for a Big 12 championship? Don't really know what to expect there from them. There's some other teams in this league here. Not really going to get into Colorado. I don't have a lot of expectations for Colorado, and I don't love how their offseason has went. A lot of noise from that team, and I still don't think they've done enough on the trenches, whether that's on the offensive, defensive line, to really compete at the top end of this conference. Biggest question mark for the Big 12, is this a one-bid league for the college football playoff, or can they sneak a couple of teams in? They probably need at least 2 10-win teams to have a chance to get more than one team in, and maybe need 2 11-win teams going into conference championship to get 2 teams into the playoff. Or is it kind of like what the Pac-12 used to do? Do they cannibalize each other and they only get the team who wins the conference and the automatic bid in there? But either way, the Big 12 football is must-watch football because of the depth of this conference, because of the competitiveness of this conference, and just because of the uncertainty of this conference as well. You just don't know what you're going to get consistently from a lot of teams on a week-to-week basis. So it is must-watch for me and one of the best conferences to watch in the entire country. And then we'll move to Major League Baseball, and I'll finish my show as I've done the last 2 weeks, ranking my top 5 all-time at each position. Was catcher, first baseman. Now we're at second base. And my number one second baseman of all time is going to be Rogers Hornsby. Now, of course, I didn't get to see an actual play of a pitch of Rogers Hornsby because he played 50, 60 years before I was even born. But if you look at the stats for him here, World Series champ in 1926, 2-time NL MVP, 2-time Triple Crown winner, which is something that doesn't get done anymore, and then 7-time batting title champion, and was a guy who was a mainstay for a lot of teams early on in the MLB era there in the 20s and even in the early 30s and late teens. Rogers Hornsby was a guy, he was one of the best players of that one of the early eras in Major League Baseball. And then at number 2, we're going to go to a player I didn't get to see play either, but he was closer to my era, and that is Joe Morgan. Played mostly for the Reds. 10-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion for the Big Red Machine in Cincinnati, 2-time NL MVP, 5-time Gold Glove winner, so he was also a very good defensive player for the Reds as well. Just a guy, consistent player. The Reds had a lot of talent on that team, of course, with guys like Pete Rose and Johnny Bench, but he was another guy that you added onto this roster and made them the Big Red Machine, and that's why they were successful in the 70s and early 80s. And number 3, another guy that played way before I was born, and that is Eddie Collins. If you've ever seen the movie 8 Men Out, he's the college boy on that Black Sox team. He was a part of that 1919 Chicago White Sox Black Sox scandal, but he wasn't a part of that because he was kind of shunned by the rest of the team being the college boy. If you've ever seen that movie, you know what I'm talking about. But either way, Eddie Collins had a great career, 6-time World Series champion, an MVP, 4-time stolen base leader in the league, which is impressive as well, and a part of the 3,000 hit club. Didn't have a ton of home runs, but home runs were hard to come by in that era unless you were Babe Ruth. But Eddie Collins at number 3 is one of the best second basemen of all time. And then another guy I didn't get to see either, but someone closer to my era also, and that is Ryan Sandberg, the mainstay at second base for the Chicago Cubs. He's my number 4 second baseman of all time. 10-time All-Star, NL MVP in 1984, 9-time Gold Glove winner. And that's why I had him on the list, because it's not just his offensive prowess, it's his defensive prowess. And he's probably the best all-around second baseman on this list, and maybe one of the best all-around second basemen of all time as well. And then I'll go ahead and finish out my list with my number 5 second baseman. And this guy I actually got to see play. It was sort of towards the tail end of his career, about middle to tail end of his career, and that is Craig Biggio. Of course, he was part of the Killer Bees for the Houston Astros of Biggio and Bagwell at the second and first base position. 7-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove winner, 3,000 hit club, and probably the second best defensive second baseman on this list, in my opinion. Craig Biggio was a guy, he wasn't the biggest power hitting guy, but as you can see with 3,000 hits and over a 300 career batting average, was just a guy he was a guy you can count on in the clutch. He was a guy you could count on to get a hit, and one of the best hitters of a second baseman as well. So that is my top 5. At number 1, I had Rogers Hornsby. Number 2, I had Joe Morgan. Number 3, I had Eddie Collins. 4, I had Ryan Sandberg. And then at 5, I had Craig Biggio. Second baseman, kind of like catcher, is a very hard position to break down and give your top 5, but that is my top 5. Would love to hear comments or DMs if you want to DM me at Sports Talk on a Budget, either on Twitter or Instagram, or you can just DM me at Cody Dotier on Facebook as well. Your top 5 second baseman. But either way, that has been my show for the day. Thank you for watching and listening to this show. Of course, you can find it for the audio version on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Or if you prefer the video version, it is here on YouTube. Please like and subscribe right down here to the show. But thank you again for watching and listening, and have a great day and have a great Saturday.